Should you do a fiancé visa or a marriage visa? In this video, we're going to talk in detail the entire process of a fiancé visa and a marriage visa so you understand what's the best option for you. Now, you may be watching this video because you're thinking about bringing, your fiancé or your future partner, wife, husband into the United States, and you want to understand what are the options in terms of the fiancé visa and what are the options in terms of the marriage visa. Okay, so let's start. Okay, and I do a lot of consultations with clients to try to help them to see if the fiancé visa option is better and faster for them, or the marriage visa is better or faster for them. And the definition of better varies from person to person, and we're going to talk about some of those nuances and the differences and the benefits and kind of the cons of each process. All right, so now let's start. First, I'm going to talk about the fiancé visa. The reason why I like to talk about the fiancé visa first is that the fiancé visa is the option to go if you are actually unmarried. All right, so if you are already married, you cannot do the fiancé visa. So I'm going to say it again because a lot of people say, well, I'm married, but I'm not married on paper, or I've got something that I think I can kind of hide, or the government's not going to know. I like to be very clear here and tell you guys that if you are married, it's best just to do the marriage-based process because God forbid something happens and the government finds out that you were secretly married or you had some sort of religious marriage. I have a lot of clients who happen to be Muslim and they have let's say it's something called a nikah, an Islamic marriage. And they're like, well, we have a nikah, we have an Islamic marriage, but I haven't registered it, so I'm going to try to do the fiancé visa process. I would kind of advise against that because should something happen and they discover it, then they're going to accuse you of misrepresentation and fraud, and you don't want to get into that trouble and that headache, all right? So again, going back to the fiancé visa, this is only for people who are unmarried and have met their significant other, future husband, wife, partner in the last 2 years, all right? And I want to say this, that have met them in person. And a lot of times people call me, well, I have known her or him for a long time. We grew up together. I want to bring her here, or I saw her, I spoke to her on the phone or online, or my mom and dad met her or somebody else met her. You have to physically have been in her company, in her presence, and have documentation of that in the last 2 years. That's really important. It can't be 2.5. It can't even be 2 years and 1 day. It has to be in that 2 year, and I would kind of urge you to do it in that 1 year period just to be on the safe side. So again, that's kind of the baseline requirement. You have been in a meeting with that person in less than 2 years, and that you are unmarried and you're able to be engaged. And that's also important because I have clients who contact me and say, well, I'm going through a divorce, but I'm already engaged. USCIS is not going to look favorably upon that in a fiancé visa petition because they're going to say, well, you can't be engaged because your divorce hasn't finalized. Or sometimes people rush to get their divorce process started and they want to try to start the fiancé visa. I strongly advise against that as well because my goal is not to just file your case. A good attorney's goal is to win your case, and we're talking about winning your fiancé visa case. So again, 2 years or less physical presence, meeting with them, and you document it. You have no barriers to enter into a relationship, meaning you're not currently married or you're going through a divorce process, or he or she is not going through some messy divorce. And that's important, okay, guys? But don't get married to that person after you get engaged because the fiancé visa process, we'll get to the end part of it, requires you to get married in the United States, okay? And that's important. So when you file that petition, it's the I-29F petition, and you submit it with USCIS, and it's 2026, so the processing times are taking a little bit longer, but still, I get most of my cases approved, in less than a year on a fiancé visa petition. And what happens is that the petition is submitted and you attach evidence of the meeting and evidence of an engagement, and I always have my clients write a letter showing their declaration and intent to marry once they enter the United States and they're able to, be together. And I always tell my clients that, hey, say you're going to get married in 90 days or less. That's really critical and really important, because otherwise, the whole entire fiancé visa process is not going to work out. So you get it submitted and processed. If it gets approved, you got to go to the next stage, which is known as visa processing. Again, fiancé visas, for many people who don't realize, are non-immigrant visas, because the immigrant intent is established after you enter and you get married, and you can do, the adjustment of status. So let's talk about this process of the petition getting approved and you doing the non-immigrant visa. You have to go onto the online portal, create an account, and submit the the 160. The DS-260 is connected to a marriage-based petition. We're going to talk about that later, but this one is called the DS-160. You submit it, you schedule your, significant other's interview. It could be at the embassy, whether it's Islamabad or Lagos or Ghana, Accra, or Santo Domingo, or in the Philippines. It doesn't matter, but the process is generally similar for scheduling that interview. And make sure that significant other shows up, after the interview scheduled, with sufficient documentation for you guys to demonstrate that you have an intention to get married and that they know about each other's, lives. Okay, that's really important. I know the evidence is not as high as on a marriage case when you have your interview on a fiancé visa, but you have to be prepared. You have to know about your relationship with that person who's in the United States, because the person who's going to have the interview at the embassy is the applicant. And the applicant is going to be responsible for knowing, when they met and what their significant other is doing in the United States, because that's important to establish a genuine relationship. And you don't want to have your fiancé visa refused or denied or some other administrative processing, because it's really hard to get it out of there. Even with a writ of mandamus, it's really hard, because I've seen it from my clients go through difficulty if they're not successful on their fiancé visa interview at the embassy overseas. But hopefully everything goes well for you, your significant other, or you have a interview that essentially gets approved, and you get the fiancé visa and you enter the United States with the fiancé visa. The next step is to get married in 90 days and do the adjustment of status. The next step is kind of like the last step, all right? And the marriage and adjustment of status step, you want to try to do this as soon as possible when you enter the United States, because number one, you are required to do it under 90 days. If you don't, you could run into some trouble. If you don't marry that person, they may say you got to go back because you're not admissible and you can't marry somebody else. So there's some issues connected to that fiancé visa process. When you enter the United States, you got to do certain things correctly and only that way, because you have no other option to be able to do it. Now, I will also tell you that when you're filing the adjustment of status application, you gotta show significant amount of evidence about your relationship. And you've gotta submit, you don't have to file the I-130 because you married and you're now doing the adjustment of status, but you still have to submit all the other things that are necessary as part of the adjustment of status process, in terms of the, you got to make sure the medical is good, the affidavit of support is good. You should also apply for a work permanent social, because when you're here as that applicant on the fiancé visa, you're not going to get the green card until you actually apply and then go through the entire process for the adjustment of status, including an interview about eligibility and admissibility. All right, that's really important. So in many ways, the fiancé visa process, even though it's faster for you to get into the United States, it could take longer for you to get a green card, because coming to America doesn't mean you're going to actually get the green card right away. You still have to do an extra step of doing adjustment of status. Okay, guys, now let's switch over to the marriage process. And the marriage process is relatively straightforward because it involves two major stages. The first stage is filing the I-130 petition and the I-130A with USCIS because you're already married, there's no barriers to marriage, and you have the correct documentation about the marriage documents, so you can do that marriage process correctly and file it with USCIS. I recommend you file online. It's a lot faster, and make sure you attach sufficient evidence in terms of what's necessary for a marriage case. Bona fide evidence of a marriage includes travel, spending time together, purchasing gifts, texting each other, photos of you guys spending time together, and sometimes in my clients' cases, I do affidavits explaining how they met each other, know each other, and then that should be a very strong case, all right? And I work with clients who file cases on their own. They get a request for evidence, they get something, sending a notice of intent to deny, and I take over, and we're usually able to get those issues resolved and get the I-130 approved. When the I-130 gets approved, it gets sent to the National Visa Center for visa processing because it's going to be an immigrant visa on the I-130. And the Visa Center's purpose is to collect documents. So you go online, you submit the DS-260, you submit all the other necessary documents connected to the affidavit of support. That's the second stage in terms of the visa processing. But the Visa Center is a unique place because it's just kind of a place that collects documents, makes sure all the documents are necessary for review and for collection and upload. And they will only schedule an interview when all the documents are complete. They'll send you a notice saying that you're documentarily qualified or you're complete. And then you can move on to the final stage in terms of that visa step processing, which is the interview at that U.S. Embassy abroad. And it is an interview for an immigrant visa. And that immigrant visa is essentially going to get you a green card when you land in the United States. Because unlike the fiancé visa, when you do an immigrant visa on a marriage-based case, the immigration officer overseas, whether it's in Lagos, Accra, Islamabad, Santo Domingo, and DR, it doesn't matter. That officer, he or she, is going to make the determination that you should get a green card. They're going to go through your DS-260, they're going to go through criminal documents and other records connected to that, and they're also going to make sure that there's no barriers or no other problems that previously were not examined. So they will go through the bona fides of your relationship. They'll ask you questions about your marriage and your relationship to make sure it's legitimate and that it's still valid. And if they approve it, you'll have a visa issued, and then you'll enter the United States on what's known as a immigrant visa. And when you enter the United States, you should be able to get a green card mailed to you because you already paid all the necessary filing fees and all the other things connected to that, okay? So again, that's the marriage-based process compared to the fiancé visa process, which is different. They're very similar, but there's differences. And I always recommend my clients to speak to an attorney, see which process is better, because you don't want to start a marriage process if you're not married or you've got some issues, and you don't want to start a fiancé visa process if you're already married and you've got some other issues to resolve connected to that. So hopefully you guys see the two process, and I can speak to you in detail about which one's the best one for you. And there's lots of videos online that show like the different steps and the stages, including myself on different platforms, so you can check them out. But those are generally, you know, the steps that two people can take, you know, to come into the United States and be together on a fiancé visa or a marriage visa. And it doesn't really matter, you know, it can be husband, wife, partner, and the rules apply to everyone equally. All right, guys, thank you so much.